I'll tell you what's a high tariff nation is Canada. Canada charges us 250% for our milk product and other product, and a tremendous tariff on lumber and things as such. And yet we don't need their lumber. We have more lumber than they do. We don't need Canada's lumber.
Major construction firms across the US have issued a rare coordinated warning. The American housing market is entering a period of severe instability, driven by tightening Canadian softwood lumber supply, and there is no relief in sight. Builders, developers, and contractors across the country are scrambling. The damage is already measurable, and it is accelerating in ways that most of Washington has not yet fully absorbed. Here is what makes the situation so difficult to counter. Canada has not announced an export ban. There has been no dramatic policy declaration, no headline-grabbing shutdown, no formal restriction that American trade lawyers can challenge at the WTO. Canada has instead restructured how it prices, processes, and distributes softwood lumber in ways that sidestep tariff frameworks entirely, while delivering the same economic outcome, maximum pressure on American construction, with no visible lever to pull in response. Roughly 30 to 35% of all softwood lumber used in American home building comes from Canada. In a typical wood frame house, lumber accounts for 20 to 25% of total material costs. A 10% increase in lumber prices adds between $8,000 and $15,000 to the cost of a new home. For American families already navigating high interest rates and persistent inflation, that is not a manageable variable. It is a structural shock that pushes home ownership permanently out of reach for millions of households and feeds inflationary pressure across the entire consumer economy. The strategy Canada has executed is built across 5 simultaneous structural pressure points rather than a single visible action. Together, they form a choke that is nearly impossible to address through conventional trade policy responses, because no single element of it crosses the line into a tariff actionable restriction. The first pressure point is production control. Canada has quietly reduced softwood lumber output by closing and consolidating older, less efficient sawmills. Since the peak production year of 2018, national softwood output has fallen by roughly 15 to 20%. In British Columbia alone, more than 10,000 forestry jobs disappeared between 2019 and 2025. This is not a temporary market fluctuation. It is a deliberate reset of capacity designed to permanently reduce the volume of lumber flowing into American markets at low prices. Fewer mills produce less output. Less output means tighter supply. Tighter supply means higher prices. And Canada captures that premium, rather than American buyers receiving the discount they had historically come to expect as a structural feature of the bilateral resource relationship. The second pressure point is domestic priority. Canadian provinces are increasingly directing available lumber supply toward domestic housing projects, infrastructure development, and public construction. Exporting to the United States is no longer treated as the automatic default. When supply gets constrained, American buyers move to the back of the allocation queue, not because of an explicit regulatory barrier, but because Canadian governments have decided their own citizens, builders, and economic development take priority. That shift in priority did not require legislation. It required a policy choice. And that choice has fundamentally altered North American supply chain assumptions that the American construction industry had never questioned. The third pressure point is value-added processing. Canada is exporting dramatically less raw lumber and significantly more engineered wood products, cross-laminated timber, glued laminated beams, advanced structural panels. The result is higher export revenue per tree, but lower physical volume available for conventional American construction. Canada captures more economic value per harvest by processing domestically rather than shipping raw logs south, keeping jobs, wages, and industrial value inside the country, while American builders scramble for affordable framing materials. The American builder pays more for less. Canada earns more from fewer exports. The arithmetic of the old relationship has been reversed. The fourth pressure point is environmental standards. New carbon tracking requirements and sustainability certification frameworks raise compliance costs across the industry. American buyers can still technically purchase Canadian lumber, but the product is more expensive and less abundant than the previous arrangement allowed. Environmental policy becomes an indirect trade lever, one that operates entirely outside traditional tariff frameworks while achieving the same functional outcome of reducing American access to cheap construction inputs. Washington cannot challenge an environmental standard the way it can challenge an export tax. The fifth pressure point is logistics prioritization. Railways and ports now move energy shipments, mineral exports, and critical materials ahead of lumber. Softwood lumber shipments face deliberate sequencing delays, heightened transport cost uncertainty, and rising logistics expenses. Another invisible squeeze that compounds every other pressure point already operating. No single element of this structure constitutes a trade barrier in the conventional legal sense. All five together create a choke that tightens supply, raises prices, and creates planning uncertainty across the American construction industry without producing a single actionable target for American trade lawyers to attack. The downstream impact on American construction moves through four distinct damage cycles once lumber supply tightens and prices escalate. The first cycle is direct cost inflation. Builders do not simply absorb material cost increases. They add risk premiums on top of material price increases to protect against future volatility. As lumber costs climb, new home prices rise faster than wages, pushing home ownership out of reach for the buyers who are already most stretched. That feeds inflation throughout the consumer economy, keeps interest rates elevated for longer, and creates additional financing cost pressure on every new construction project simultaneously. The second cycle is timeline disruption. Less predictable lumber supply creates a construction scheduling crisis, where projects face constant delays from material availability, uncertainty. A single month of construction delay can raise total project costs by 5 to 7% through financing charges, labor retention expenses, and equipment rental fees. In a trade environment already strained by cost pressures, delays multiply losses rather than stabilizing them. Projects that were marginally viable at original cost estimates become financially impossible after delay-driven cost escalation. The third cycle is market expectations damage. Fear itself begins driving destructive behavior before the physical shortage fully materializes. Developers, distributors, and wholesalers rush to secure supply in advance, creating hoarding, speculative buying, and artificial shortages. Prices rise not only because lumber is genuinely tighter, but because every market participant expects it to be tighter and acts accordingly. That feedback loop destabilizes pricing across the entire construction economy, independently of what actual supply volumes are doing at any given moment. The fourth cycle is the political and electoral damage that Washington fears most. Housing is no longer merely an economic issue in America. It is a voter issue that determines elections. Rising home prices and rents push younger families permanently out of ownership, increase rents across metropolitan areas, and raise housing's weight inside consumer inflation indices. As inflation stays elevated, interest rates remain higher for longer, creating a cost spiral that traces directly back to trade policy failures and resource dependency that decades of assumptions made invisible. Canada gains structurally from the entire restructuring it has executed. By shifting away from raw lumber exports toward processed wood products, Canada captures more value per tree while creating higher skilled, better paid domestic employment. Instead of exporting low margin, raw inputs to American builders, Canada sells finished and semi-finished products with stronger pricing power in global markets. By embedding carbon tracking, sustainability certification, and traceability requirements into its export framework, Canada positions itself as a rule setter rather than a price taker in the global timber market, a more durable, competitive position than competing on volume at the lowest achievable cost. Canada is also protecting the long-term resource base by treating forests as strategic assets rather than inventory to be cleared at maximum throughput. Slower harvesting supports ecological stability and supply predictability across decades, building the kind of reliability that European and Asian buyers who are willing to meet Canadian standards and pay Canadian prices are actively seeking as alternatives to less stable international supply chains. Washington's available responses follow three predictable paths, and all three are structurally inadequate. Reimposing or escalating tariffs on Canadian lumber raises prices inside America without creating any new supply. Expanding domestic production sounds viable until permitting timelines. Environmental regulations, legal challenges, and community opposition make meaningful capacity additions take years rather than months. Switching American construction to alternative materials like steel or concrete encounters the reality that both are more expensive, more energy intensive, and subject to their own volatile global pricing dynamics. Together, those responses reveal a structural exposure that Canada did not create. Canada revealed it. Years of American reliance on cheap imported lumber, combined with unresolved bilateral trade disputes, left the American housing market sitting on a dependency that no one wanted to examine closely. Canada identified the exact point of maximum vulnerability and applied pressure across 5 simultaneous structural dimensions without ever issuing a single formal restriction. The result arrived not through a dramatic announcement, but through structure, quietly, systematically, and at a scale that the American construction industry is only now beginning to fully measure.